welcome back to another episode of the Leaders of the Game podcast with me, your host, James Gershfield. In today's episode, I'm joined by James Haigh. James is the co-CEO of We Are Sweet, a leading tech company that specializes in using live data to elevate fan engagement and enable deeper storytelling. James is a technical founder, having started his 20-year career as a freelance web developer, who then used those skills to create custom platforms in the sports industry. Since 2011, James and his co-founder have grown We Are Sweet from humble beginnings into an award-winning business, employing people across the UK, working with some of the biggest names in sport. Being a technical founder, James found himself in a leadership role early on in his career and learnt to grow and manage a fully remote business, sometimes the hard way. James's most recent achievement is We Are Sweet winning the ISC Innovation Award in conjunction with their client PTO for their work in bringing live data to the T100 Triathlon World Tour. So with that being said, let's dive straight into this episode. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss out on all future episodes. James, welcome to episode 3 of Leaders of the Game. Great to have you on board, mate.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Good stuff. Well, look, I think we're going to dive straight into it today. So why don't you start by giving us a background on you, sharing your journey, and also how you became the co-CEO of We Are Sweet?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of fell into my current role, if you like. Basically, as a teenager, I was in that generation of people that were on the forums that were learning how to code kind of accidentally. I basically didn't really leave the house as a teenager and sort of taught myself to code by browsing forums and stuff. Before I knew it, I was creating these sort of really basic, PHP login interfaces and like really simple websites. I met the person who is now my co-CEO and co-founder. He kind of did the same, but with a cracked version of Photoshop. So we kind of came together because he was able to design stuff that I wasn't really that great at, but I was then able to do the coding. So as a couple of sort of people in our late teens, we started building websites together. And we'd sort of, we'd sell a website to the veterinary practice around the corner or something. And then suddenly through some contacts, so connections that we had, we ended up working on a really big project for IMG, and we were still just a couple of kids. I think we were pretty good at what we did by then, but it was still a bit of a change in pace, right? From working with small businesses around the corner to building actually what was the largest sport video archive in the world and still is. So we together, Lou, my business partner, and I, we designed and built that front end. Thankfully for us, went really well. And that kind of propelled us into the world of sport. And then we got intros. So we got intros to other clients that we either have worked with or now still work with. But ultimately, it's all been about us kind of like, we just kind of said yes to stuff, right? And I think that real attitude, like that bullish attitude of being a couple of 18-year-olds, like, yeah, we can do that, is something that we've kind of shared throughout our journey as well at We Are Sweet. So We Are Sweet isn't just the two of us anymore. We've got a team of people across the UK. We've always focused on what we think is like, or what we like to say is tech innovation. So yes, we started off building websites, but we realized that our skills were way broader than that. We could apply that to creating apps or creating like really unique, interesting fan engagement experiences. So we kind of sort of modeled what our core service is over time. But ultimately, I think it still sits at the core of a few people now saying yes to stuff and doing really cool stuff.
Yeah. And for the listeners that don't know, give us a sort of a snapshot of who We Are Sweet are.
So We Are Sweet is still effectively the two of us. So myself and my co-founder, we started working together, as I just said. We've grown the team now, and we've got a remote team. And being remote kind of wasn't a choice. It's something we kind of just fell into again, because like, as a couple of 18-year-olds, right, you don't have the funds to rent or even and purchase an office space. When we hired our first couple of people, we thought we'd try the remote thing and see if we could grow a business like that. COVID completely changed things and made remote much more normalized. But yeah, we're a team of remote people across the UK. Our core clients really are the likes of Professional Triathletes Organisation. We still work with IMG. We've done some stuff with ATP Media, Super Tri. We're doing some stuff at the moment with England Futsal, and we're doing some stuff with esports as well. What we're really focusing at the moment is live data. So the whole idea of live data for fan engagement, but ultimately storytelling. So my theory, and a theory that is shared by some of our clients, is in a race or a match, there are things you can see, right? There are the big moments. Like, let's say you're in a race, you've got an overtake, you can see that. But there are thousands of micro moments happening that we can measure. We can measure that with biometric wearable sensors that are on the athletes or the players. We can measure that based on crunching the data that we've already got. And by doing something with that data, we can create graphics, we can create fan engagement experiences, we can create second screens, but ultimately it all falls into storytelling. So what are We Are Suite doing at the moment is ultimately trying to figure out that live data space, how we can utilize live data across all sports to better enable storytelling from a broadcast and a professional sport perspective.
Yeah. And we've spoken before about this before we jumped on this podcast about running a remote business, which we'll come into in a little bit more detail later because I'm fascinated by it and you guys seem to have done it really well. But I guess to start with, in your experience, what is the difference between leadership and management?
Leadership for me is about getting people to believe in you, believe in your vision, and like get them on the bus. We use this term at We Are Suite, like on the bus. Like we need a group of people that know where they're heading, know why they're heading there, and like really want to go there as well. And then for me, management is more like the day-to-day. Like it's making sure people have got clarity on the task, making sure they're competent, making sure they're compliant. We use something that we've been taught by our leadership trainer. It's the 4 C's. So clarity is first. Like you must have clarity on your role expectations or what the job is. Once you've got clarity, you need to be competent. You need to be able to do that thing. Then you need to be compliant. You need to choose to do that thing. And ultimately, the 4th C is control in a management sense. So I see those as 2 very different things. Leadership, getting people to believe in you and the vision. Management is the more day-to-day, like making sure that people have the tools they need to do the job and keeping an eye on that.
Yeah. I think going back to one of the first things you said about how We Are Suite evolved, it was kind of like just by saying yes. And I think that's a crucial thing. And I speak to so many people about this is there's that famous saying, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Exactly.
And I'm just, as you said what you were saying, I've just pictured that slogan up in your office somewhere, but you don't have the office, but I could just imagine that being at the forefront of your minds the whole time, because that's how this business has started. Companies that you've mentioned that you're working with, the likes of IMG, they're great logos and great clients to have, which you wouldn't have had you not just jumped in the swimming pool without your armbands on. You can't swim, but you've just said yes. And
exactly.
So I think it's testament to that, really. How do you strike that balance between then leading with a vision of what you want We Are Suite to achieve, you and the co-founder, but then also running the day-to-day operations of the business?
Yeah, I think they're both muscles that you need to train, aren't they, really? Your leadership and management, they're both different skill sets. And I think people find that they naturally gravitate to one or the other. I think I naturally more gravitate to leadership. Like I like setting out a vision. I like communicating that. I like people being on board. And I must say, like, management is not my natural skill set, and I've had to train that a lot more. And I think it's ultimately like, where are we today? Are we at a point where I need to set a task and ensure that people have, right, okay, so we're in management mode. Are we at an all hands meeting where I need to get people exciting? Right, I'm in leadership mode. But ultimately, you're going to switch between both modes and probably be somewhere in the middle of both modes throughout the day, depending on the situation and depending on the person you're speaking to and what you're trying to get out of them. So I think it's really important to be cognizant of both modes and then use each mode for the situation you're in.
Yeah, we're going to talk about We Are Suite being a remote business and how you manage that on a day-to-day perspective and how it's evolved and how it obviously works for you guys. So keen to understand that in a bit more detail. But from the day you started that business through hiring people, let's call it hiring and firing people, but getting rid of people that maybe haven't worked in the business, have you seen that there's any specific leadership qualities that are more important in a remote environment? In our business, we set MLEs, which are minimum levels of expectations, which we say to the guys, going back to your point about clarity, every single day, this is what we expect from you from a minimum level of expectation. And that can be 5 business development calls. It can be registering 2 jobs every single week. But do you have that in your business?
100%. Yeah, we call them MEDs, minimum expectation documents. Very similar.
Same
idea.
line.
Yeah, exactly. I guess like with a team of designers and engineers, we have fewer, I guess, numeric measures. It's not like, okay, I can't say to someone, you need to write 1,000 lines of code a day. Like that's just not that's not how it works. So we needed to think about measures of like, okay, like how do we measure what is high quality? How do we ensure that things are tested correctly? How do we ensure that people are also just communicating with each other? Because those aren't numbers that you hit, but those are more sort of, there's a combination of hard and soft skills there that you have to convey. I think remotely there are a few more variables as well. Like, do I need to, like, here's a question an employee might ask: do I need to be seen to be online on Slack? Like, if my dot on Slack goes grey for more than a couple of hours, am I now not meeting expectation? So actually, like, we need to tell our team, like, okay, like, for example, in our business, I know it's not the same in every, but like, I'm not monitoring how many hours you are online per day, but what I do care about is ultimately the quality of your work, which is then within your minimum expectation document. So we need to figure out, like, what are the actual measurable things that tell us whether somebody is doing a good job. So yeah, that I think particularly on the remote angle, the MEDs absolutely critical.
Great. I love that you've got those in the business as well. Keeps people accountable for what the outputs are and what you expect from them from an outputs perspective.
It keeps me accountable as a manager as well, because it also gives people the opportunity to say, I didn't know I needed to do this, where it's not in my minimum expectation document. And then suddenly I'm like, oh God, yeah, I didn't give them clarity on that. And it enables a conversation to be had as a couple of grown-ups rather than like people making like loads of assumptions. I don't think anyone ever comes to work to do a bad job, right? People just lack the clarity on what a good job looks like.
Yeah. What are some of the hardest challenges you face running a remote business?
I think creating a sense of like team camaraderie. We've tried lots of things over the years. So I always think of it as a pendulum, and we've swung in sort of different directions. So we've gone from okay, try and make everything async, try and give people, you know, the freedom, and kind of like don't force them to see each other in real life if they don't want to, like super, like, I guess, hands off. And then we've swung in the other direction across the years of like, okay, let's hire an Airbnb for a weekend, get everyone there, get a load of food and drink, hot tubs, you know, the work. And like we've kind of tried all these different things. I think as the business has grown up, as the people in the business have grown up as well, and as we've attracted maybe a slightly different archetype of person, I guess we found that there's no silver bullet, and we also need to get people understanding each other, wanting to work with each other, without necessarily having to go and get everybody drunk in order to create relationships, right?
Yeah.
We've had people work here before that aren't really that interested in jumping on a call on a Friday afternoon to have a coffee with a colleague. Like, they'd rather go out and do something else. Fair enough. So we've had to sort of figure out, okay, what are the mandatory like team camaraderie activities that we are now going to impose to get people talking and create those relationships, and how far do we go?
And how do you do that? How do you foster a culture within a remote business?
It's really tough. Like the way that we do it now, which I'm not sure is going to be the best for everybody, or may not even be the best for us in a couple of years. Speak to people really often. Like make sure that you see each other's faces. Like, video is compulsory. Like, see each other's face and have a chat. When we have our morning stand-ups, we're all on the call. Like, when we troubleshoot together, we troubleshoot together on a call. Like, I want my team to know that I'm not there to hold their hand and do their work for them, but I am there to support them. And I think people follow that. People, like, if the bosses are there, you know, showing willingness to help, showing good communication, you know, being available, then they'll follow that, and then suddenly that will be a culture that's created, because ultimately everyone tends to follow what happens from the top.
And you get together much? You mentioned the Airbnbs, the hot tubs. Is that experiences, or is that dreams that you do? Do you get together much as a team?
We did that a few times, but it was the reason we chose to do that for the first time was after COVID. So we hired quite a few people during COVID. We grew a lot. But none of these people had met each other. I hadn't met in real life more than half of the team that I work with. And we were like, right, we've got to do something. You know, lockdown is over. COVID is sort of, well, it's never gone, is it? But it's, you know, it's definitely much more under control. All right, let's get people together and kind of have a party to you know, celebrate that we got through it together. So we did that after COVID, and we did maybe sort of 3 or 4 more times. But they got a bit repetitive, and they got a bit sort of like, not every team member was comfortable with like the rowdiness of like 2 days of drinking. So we thought, okay, right, let's put a pin in that. So to answer your question, what we do now is maybe 3 or 4 times throughout the year, we'll meet up, We'll put people up in hotels. Typically it's in London, but we're going to do one in Newcastle soon. We've got a few team members up north. So we'll get together. We'll do dinner. We'll do drinks. It's never particularly rowdy. Those people that want to take it further and go out can. But I guess we sort of give people the opportunity, and we encourage people to meet up outside of work as well. I've got a team member in Manchester and a team member in Southend-on-Sea, and they went to a gig together in London a couple of days ago.
Amazing.
And like just hearing that's happening without me making it happen, they chose to do that. They didn't even tell me until I knew about it after the fact. Like, that was really satisfying for me to know that these people are sort of choosing to spend time with each other outside of work.
Yeah, that whole talk of COVID just takes me back when you were saying those coffee chats. It's like, I remember the company I was working for, it's kind of like you had those coffee chats put into your diary to keep sane and talk to your colleagues at work. And you used to sit there literally with your coffee on the call, just talking about your day, just like this. And it's just like, that was part of it. But I think, we've spoken about this previously. COVID was, in a way, great for you because that was your biggest part of growth. Talk to me through that. How did that happen?
Well, yeah, during COVID, I think it's easy to forget that it's only 5 years ago, and now like we've seen so much change now in like AI, for example. And the reason I'm talking about AI in a COVID question is because it's a massive change in the world in how we see and how we value technology and engineering. So if we go back just 5 years, engineers were so in demand. The big tech companies were hiring as many possible engineers as they could, and businesses were realizing that, wait a minute, we need to go online. And that sounds mad, doesn't it? In 2020, people were realizing they need to go online, but there were so many businesses that maybe they didn't have operations that worked remotely, or they didn't have operations where they could sell online or particularly thrive online. So companies like ours did pretty well, and we had to then go and hire engineers, and then we had to go to market competing with a lot bigger companies with much higher budgets than us that also wanted to hire a load of engineers. So we grew very quickly. We did the saying yes thing, right? We said yes to all of these projects. We said yes to hiring a load of new people, and ultimately, actually, in reflection, I think we grew too fast. It was around the time where I was just sort of starting a bit of management training, just sort of understanding what leadership looks like. We had a lot of really good people that again, like I said earlier, people don't come to work wanting to do a bad job, but we didn't have the structure and the processes and the culture in place to enable that to happen, because it all just happens so quickly. So I think we had a motivated and exciting team, but we didn't have the MEDs, stuff like that. So
structure.
The structure. So we learned loads from it. We did some really, really cool projects during that time. But ultimately, I think if I were to do that again, I would sort of slow down a bit and just make sure that we've got the structure and the processes in place to enable all of those new staff to come in and do a really good job.
Yeah. I'm curious to know. So you mentioned earlier about the leadership coach that you have.
Yeah.
And he's brought in these 4 C's. Did you install that after what you've just said around the mistakes around structure?
Yeah, we did. We realized, well, in fact, we had somebody sort of come into a bit of a middle management role, and we thought, okay, we need to get some leadership and management training for this person in middle management. Okay, while we're at it, Lou and I, we'll jump on that training as well, not realizing, you don't know what you don't know, right? Not realizing that we didn't have that kind of foundational knowledge of even the difference between leadership and management, let alone anything else. So yeah, I guess the catalyst for that was putting somebody in middle management and wanting to frame them up, if you like. And we ended up, thankfully, being part of that training and learning a hell of a lot. But yeah, it all happened kind of towards the end of that COVID growth period.
You mentioned something which I resonate with a lot. It was only 5 years ago when you said, some companies are thinking, right, we need to get online, which you think only 5 years ago is a bit crazy. I have so many conversations now with clients, colleagues, friends about fan engagement and live data. I feel like it's only been the last 2 to 3 years where people have actually cottoned on to fan engagement, the fan experience, live data within sport and entertainment. That's very recent. And obviously you guys are at the forefront of that. Have you seen that surge of, we really need to look at fan engagement and the fan experiences, and we really need to look at live data? And you start to think, well, are you not doing anything? Do you uncover some real interesting stories around that?
Yeah, and I think as well, like if we go back to COVID only 5 years ago, back then, people like a lot of organizations were like, okay, how do we survive, right? How do we, like, rather than selling out a stadium anymore, we need to now go and find new revenue opportunities. So maybe fan engagement wasn't the top of their list. Maybe it could have been one of the devices they used in order to survive, but it was survival. But now we're seeing, like, we're seeing all of the investment in the Middle East. We're seeing, upcoming challenger sports and women's sports. And we're seeing all of this activity bubbling along. And people are now looking for a reason to differentiate themselves. The challenger sports are looking for a way of explaining, what is this sport to new fans? Women's sports need a differentiator to gain new fans. And then obviously we've got all of this investment going on in the Middle East where they're creating a whole part of the world that is just going to be known for sport. So we're seeing now that differentiators to attract new fans, but also keep existing fans engaged, is becoming really, really part of the conversation. And we're here for that because we believe that is all going to be powered by data.
In your experience, your most recent experience, are there any sports in particular that are really buying into this and really driving that new audience, or giving their current audience something new? Any particular sports in particular?
So we work a lot with triathlon. One of our key clients is Professional Triathletes Organization, and they're super innovative. They're really pioneering. Like 100K triathlons, like they're sort of 4.5 hours long. And unless you know triathlon, sort of your channel
I do them. They're not 4 hours long if I was to do 100K triathlon.
Yeah, very, very true, very true. So same here as well. But you've got your casual fans sort of channel surfing, and they stumble upon Eurosport. Like the PCO are now thinking, right, how do we engage that potential new fan? You see a bunch of people swimming on the bike or running, but you don't realize that these are like really superhuman, amazing, world-class athletes doing amazing performances. So they've been super innovative in utilizing live data to help tell those stories. So yeah, I think triathlon is where we're playing at the moment, and we're seeing a lot of success. But I genuinely believe that using biometrics and live data could work anyway. It could work in let's say in tennis, in a court environment where you're thinking about, what is the agility of this player? What is the performance of this player compared to their last performance? Or are they against a rival? Like how are they doing? Are they having a good day? Are they well conditioned? Like I think triathlon and tennis are very far apart in the way that sport works, right? In the way it's scored, in the sort of level of physicality. But the whole premise of using data to tell a story is still as relevant. We just need to find the way to do that for that specific sport.
Yeah. You mentioned in COVID, you grew, and you might have actually grown too fast. Now, every company's got it. It's why people like me in the world of recruitment have jobs, right? You make bad hires. But reflecting now, did you make any bad hires? Were there lessons that you learned along the way? You obviously scaled your headcount quite a lot. You've now sort of stripped that back. Talk me through the journey of that and the bad hires and what you learned and how you adapted to it.
Yes, we have made bad hires, 100%. I think if I try and distill that into a lesson, I think, like, usually your gut is right. And then something that my business partner says, which I think he heard somewhere else, is hire quickly, fire quickly, reward quickly. And that's sometimes hard to do, isn't it? Because you've got somebody you think, okay, maybe this isn't working out, but okay, let's give them another week. Let's give them another month. Let's extend their probation. Whereas actually, sometimes you just need to make really quick decisions and move on, cut your losses. That didn't work out. And maybe it's not going to work out for us as a business, but it's probably also not going to work out for that individual. So set them free, let them go and find somewhere that actually does work for them, whether that's a culture or a skills fit or whatever. And then we can all just move on really, really quickly.
Yeah, you've got to make those, like you said, trust your gut decisions, because if it's not working, it's not working. And if you can't see improvement or light at the end of the tunnel, you do just have to cut it short.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you prioritize then when it comes to hiring now? If you were to go to market tomorrow for a new role, what do you prioritize when it comes to the hiring strategy?
We're a small, close-knit team, and we need somebody that is going to challenge us, but also is, I just use the term, don't be a dick, right? So it's culture fit. It's just like just being a decent human being, which I know just like we can kind of laugh at that, but I think is actually a really important trait for working in a team. Something that we haven't done for a while, which I really want to bring back, is having at least one interview in person. Like, we're a remote business, so naturally we do our interviews remotely. I think there's so much you can learn about, like, you go for coffee or you go for lunch with someone, just like how they order their food, like how they treat sort of wait staff, and just like how they carry themselves. I think it tells you so much about that person and how they're going to react to different situations. So yeah, I guess we prioritize being a team player, fitting in with our team, because there's no point having the best engineer in the world if they're an asshole. I just don't want you on my team if you're going to be like that. We prioritize cognitive diversity, people that think differently, people that have different experience from different backgrounds, and then ultimately, which is kind of the same as the first point, like how you hold yourself in person, like how you communicate.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point as well, because you are a small business. You're very good at what you do. You hire the best engineer. You've already told me and the listeners that you've established this culture now, which has taken some time to establish it, but you've established it. You go and hire the best engineer, and then they ruin that culture because they are such a dickhead and no one wants to be seen on camera to that person. If you do go to that Airbnb again, it's a recipe for disaster if they're coming.
Totally.
It's going to be it will spiral out of control very quickly. So with all that said, what advice would you give to somebody that's looking to hire now within a startup, a scale up, a remote business? One piece of advice.
One piece of advice. Focus on communication. How well do they communicate? How do they hold themselves? Are they going to communicate in a way that aligns with how you want to be communicated with and how your team communicates? And that is particularly important in a remote business.
Great. Right, now on to the side of the work that you do at We Are Sweet. What challenges come with integrating live data into sport and entertainment?
The challenges are
I'm sure we could be here all day talking about this, but some of the challenges.
Yeah, I guess there's two, and I'll keep them quick. The first challenge is that there's often a question around data ownership and data licensing from the athletes. That can usually be smoothed over. Like the athletes need to understand that the data is not going to be sold on to anyone else, and they can still use it. They can still slice and dice it, but ultimately it's used for fan engagement, for the greater good. That's going to attract more sponsors. That's going to elevate their sport, and everybody's going to win. That won't fly in every sport, so we need to be up for the challenges for the sports where, okay, like maybe they're not quite ready for that change. And then the second one is technical challenges. If you're out in the middle of the desert doing a triathlon, then what about the GPS coverage? What about the 4G coverage? So we need to deal with where the signal doesn't quite work, or where the wearable doesn't quite fit and sort of slips down the chest or the wrist. So we need to be prepared to know that we're not going to get 100% data accuracy 100% of the time. And we just need to put the tech in place to deal with that.
Yeah. And you're very ingrained within the world of live data in sport and entertainment. It's what your business does. But do you utilize data within We Are Sweet in a similar way?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think we use data in a slightly different way to measure time spent on projects, to measure, like, I guess, success and margin. Like, you've obviously got all the financial data that gets used to figure out what's going on in the business. Do we use anything sort of, I guess, biometric? No, but we're certainly measuring the performance of, okay, we thought this would take 2 hours, but it's taken 3 hours. Okay, right. That's a trigger that we need to talk about it. Okay. Like why did we think that? What can we learn from it? How can we make that part of the retrospective and make sure that we get that estimate right next time?
And that's great from a coaching perspective. We see it in sport all the time. Data is used for a coaching perspective. 100%. I'm a strong believer it should be used in business as well. Because like you've just said, if it's taken 3 hours when it should only really take 2 hours, we need that hour back next time we do that project. How? And then you're ultimately coaching your staff, leading, learning from them, why it took so long. You make those small adjustments, you get that extra hour next time you do the project. It allows time for you to then take on a different project and allocate more time to that. So I think it's great that you utilize it.
Yeah, I think it's also important not to, this is again using leadership and management in the right way, but like sometimes the task just should have taken 3 hours and we kind of got it wrong when we estimated it. Like, don't rush to punish someone for that. Like, learn from it and make it so that person still feels motivated and can either next time do it in 2 hours, or next time actually estimate it at 3.5 to give themselves a bit of buffer time. We're really transparent with our team about finances as well. So we're transparent about money in, what's being allocated, and how that aligns with the hours that they spend. So I think giving the team that transparency to understand, you know what, actually, when I did spend an extra day on this, that meant this for the project and meant this for the fine. Okay, right, I get that. I think it's really important to give them that transparency.
Amazing. When we spoke originally, you said something really interesting to me, which I want to dig into in a little bit more detail, and that's the fact that you've never had a manager.
Yeah.
So never having a manager. So if I look back on my career today, I've had some great managers that I've gone to work for, a couple of which are still my mentors today in my business life. But I learned a lot from them, and I learned a lot from a lot of the managers that I've had over time. You've never had one. So how has that shaped your perspective on leadership, and how have you become ultimately the leader of We Are Sweet today?
I think early on, if you sort of cast your mind back to 15 years ago, sort of Lou and I just working together, we effectively acted as a couple of freelancers, right? We'd manage the clients. So I guess my first experience of, they weren't a manager, but they were a client, right? So it's a slightly different relationship, but I still found myself almost being managed by my clients, asking for updates, asking for progress reports, and, like, can you update this? Can you change this? It's a similar thing, but it is different when you're not part of their business. But I think I picked up ways in which they communicated with me as I guess, kind of as a freelancer or as a supplier. And I thought, oh, okay, so this is naively, this is how you get people to do stuff. So I just kind of took whatever cues I could from that. And I guess without realizing, I just mirror those techniques they used on me, but also kind of without realizing, I would expect people to think exactly like me. I'm a business owner, right? Like I've always just done stuff. I've always done stuff to the best of my ability, given the time available. I'd put the extra hours in and so on. And I guess I early on expected everybody to think like me and to plan projects like me and to have I don't know, like, I'm not particularly detail oriented, but I can see a vision. Like, I expected everyone to just have a brain like me, because I didn't realize really early on that everyone's brain works completely differently. So I guess that's a lesson I probably learned the hard way. But like, I keep talking about the leadership and management training. That enabled me to understand, right, okay, not everyone thinks like you, and that's a really good thing. And you need to use the way people think differently so that you can get the best out of them and they can get the best out of you.
That's a really tricky situation to be in if you think like that as a business owner, because you have employees that don't own the business. You do. So they're not all going to think like you. They're not all going to work as hard as you. They're not going to they might do. They're not everyone's going to open up their laptop at 9, 10 o'clock at night to do something because it's business related.
Yeah,
whereas
totally.
You will. It's your baby.
Yeah, 100%. And like, don't get me wrong. Like we've got people on the team now, and we've had people in the past that have had that mindset. But I also don't think it's right to expect that from your team. Like, okay, yeah, if every couple of weeks you do an extra couple of hours or whatever, like, I think that's fine. But I think if you find yourself like if your team find themselves working to an unhealthy level all the time, you've got to ask the question, like, is this work?
Yeah. And longevity wise, that's not going to work long term, because they'll burn out, they won't enjoy the environment, and they'll just move on. And you don't want to lose good people. You've got to retain your good people.
To have to retain good people. And in what we do, we're engineers, right? We're designers. Your brain has got to be working at full capacity. And if you've just done 3 days of, 14-hour days, then your brain's not going to be working as well as it should. You need a rest.
So what would you say you've learned from self-management development through your own channels that you now apply to certain members of your team?
I think the thing that motivates me might not be the thing that motivates them. I need to find a way of communicating that vision to them in a way that they understand, in a way they resonate with, and in a way that they want to be on the bus. And I might be motivated by some crazy vision I have 5 years down the line, or ultimately the business owner by finances, or finances in a slightly different way to how an employee sees it as well. So you've just got to find the right way to motivate them and understand that they don't see the world the same as you.
Do you use that terminology? You've said it a couple of times now, on the bus. Is that like we're getting everyone on the bus?
Yeah.
There's one that I use within my team, and I think it was, can't remember who said it, but you've just got to do anything to make the boat go faster.
That's it, exactly.
And it's very similar to that. Right, we're on the bus, we all know the journey, we know where we're going. Let's do everything in our power to get there quicker, to get another client, to do the best job that we can possibly do. So I love that you keep that going. What's the hardest decision you've had to make as the co-CEO of the business?
Well, We Are Sweet has been through a few iterations. So we started off as that website design agency, and now we're a live data agency. But before we moved into live data, we had another product. It was all around athlete player engagement and communication. Like if you imagine kind of what WhatsApp does, but imagine that in like a professionally branded app that's not on WhatsApp. Built this thing out over years. Got some pilots underway. It's a good product, but it needed a bit more refinement, both on the business model and on the product. And then we started to see opportunities in the live data space, and we realized that we couldn't do both. Even though we'd invested so much time in this communication product, we thought, wait a minute, we need to put our resource and our focus on the live data stuff. So probably the hardest decision was shelving that product, the communication product that we'd spent a lot of time on, a lot of thinking, so many planning sessions, pilots. We had to let down a couple of pilots that were using it. That was really tough. I guess you've got that sunk time and cost. But
you've got to be adaptable, and you've got to know that if the time comes where you've got to drop something or park it or shelve it, as you said, and move on to something where there is a demand.
Exactly.
And looking back on things, I think, taking that direction into live data within sport and entertainment, the way the sport is now, 100% the right decision. But yeah, it's interesting to see that you've had those hard decisions to make along the way. I think, as we discussed, live data within the world of sport, fan engagement, it's booming at the moment, and it's great. So I asked the question, what are you most excited about for the future, next 3, 6, 12 months, 2 years for We Are Sweet?
I'm excited to just carry on building this out. We're exploring using machine learning and AI to be the best possible. We're not going to be doing commentary, but we're going to be powering commentary with stories. I've got such an exciting vision of what that's going to be when we've got an engine that can work across all data inputs, across all sports, and can generate stories, can engage fans in ways that they've never seen before. I just think it's all to play for at the moment. I think we're right at the start of that journey. Sport is right at the start of that journey. I think we're well placed to do it. We've got the case studies, we've got the engineering capacity and expertise to do it. I just can't wait to get it done. And I think sport is ready for it.
I completely agree with you. And I remember when we first spoke, and I'm glad you mentioned it on this podcast, was about triathlon, because I'm that guy, right? I've sat there and I'm flicking through the channels and I've come across Eurosport and I'm seeing it. I'm seeing someone in doing a bike ride, doing the run. And you're kind of like, am I just going to sit here for 4 hours and watch someone swim, run or cycle? And typically the answer is no. But then when you've got that live data around the athlete and how far ahead they are and why they're so far ahead because of the last mile, kilometer, whatever it may be, it makes it engaging, it makes it exciting. So I become that new fan. And then I find myself sitting down being like, right, what's on Eurosport? I want to see if the triathlon's on.
Right,
so it is great, and there is an impact it's having, and it's there. So I'm really excited about that. Okay, coming up to the end of the podcast, I like to do sort of quick fire questions to give the listeners a lot around leadership, getting your advice as a successful business owner. So we're going to start with, who inspires you as a leader and why?
I love Scott Galloway. I mean, his material is super high quality. He's super generous, but he doesn't take any shit from people. He's outspoken. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I just really admire how he does it.
Great. And if you could give one piece of advice to emerging leaders in any industry, if you want it to be specifically within sport and entertainment, great. But what advice would you give?
Understand your vision and get really good at articulating it.
So clarity. That first
clarity.
C.
That's it. The first C. It's all about clarity.
I can see your business is literally 4 C's. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and, and just get on the bus.
That's it. Yeah. You've summed it up.
Brilliant. How do you personally define success?
That's a really good question. I think I'm still trying to figure this out, to be honest. It's really easy to say, oh, success is this financial goal that you want to reach. And ultimately, there is always an element of that. But I also think success is bigger than financial goals. It's about like good relationships, right? Like family, friends, partner and stuff like that. And also like having the ability and the time to spend with people that you love. So it's a really tough question. It's a constant moving target. Like most business owners and probably most people listening, I always want more. Like it's always a moving target. I always want to do better. I always want to earn more money and have a better this and a better that. I think there is an element of success, which I'm maybe not there yet, where you're happy with what you've got and you have the time to spend where you want to spend it. Yeah, I think that's it. I was gonna go into more, but I think that's it.
Great. We've spoken about growing fast, hiring, bad hires, good hires. Looking back on it now, you've obviously learned a lot. Give us one non-negotiable trait that you would now look for when hiring someone into the team.
Don't be a dick. If you're a dick and if people can't work with you, it's not going to work.
How are you going to suss that out though in an interview?
Well, as mentioned earlier, we haven't always sussed that out in the interview stage. That's a really good question. I actually can't answer that question. How do you suss it out in an interview? If any listener does know how to suss that out, please tell me, because I'm sure the whole world would love to hear. I think there are certain questions you can ask. You can see what they're like in person. You can judge their communication. Ultimately, I think you've got to make what you think is the best decision based on the candidates that are available to you. Give it a go, but if it's not working, deal with it really quickly.
Yeah, and I think you said adding that step now of meeting somebody, regardless of where they are in the UK face to face, you will learn a lot from them. Like you said,
I think so.
Even that small bit of how do you treat the waiter or the waitress that delivers your coffee? It's just those little things, because if they're ignoring them, dickhead signs, red flags.
Yeah, a red flag.
But if they manage to bullshit themselves their way through it, I think what your business partner says, hire fast, fire fast, reward fast, that is an absolute, keep doing that, because then you'll be in a good position. And the last question, what's the one thing that every leader should prioritize?
I think it's got to be your team. If your team doesn't want to work for you or can't work for you or it's not working out, who are you leading? You're not a leader anymore. It's all about the team.
Brilliant. James, it's been great to have you on. Good luck with everything in the future with We Are Sweet. I'll be keeping a close eye on the triathlons, all the sport, everything that comes up. And it's been really great to have you on board.
Likewise. Thanks, James. Really enjoyed it.
Cheers, mate.